There's something hauntingly beautiful about standing before a structure built thousands of years ago, its stones weathered by time yet still whispering secrets of a forgotten world. Picture this: a circle of massive megaliths, each one carefully placed to align with the stars, or a temple carved into the earth, its walls adorned with symbols that no living person fully understands. These aren't just ruins, they're portals to the past, gateways into the minds of our ancestors who sought to bridge the gap between the earthly and the divine. Today, we're stepping into that mystery, unraveling the spiritual architecture of prehistoric sanctuaries, where every stone, every alignment, and every symbol was a deliberate act of reverence, a testament to humanity's eternal quest for meaning. Think about the last time you felt a sense of awe, maybe beneath a sky full of stars or in the quiet of an ancient forest. Now, imagine that feeling magnified 1,000-fold, channeled into the creation of sacred spaces so precise, so intentional, that they still baffle modern archaeologists. Take Stonehenge, for example. Its towering sarcens weren't just dragged across miles for practicality. They were part of a grand celestial blueprint, a physical manifestation of a spiritual connection to the cosmos. Or Göbekli Tepe, a temple complex so old it predates agriculture itself, its T-shaped pillars etched with intricate carvings of animals and symbols, as if our ancestors were trying to capture the very essence of the sacred. These sites weren't built for survival, they were built for the soul. What if I told you that these sanctuaries were more than just places of worship? They were cosmic maps, ritual stages, and perhaps even ancient universities where knowledge of the heavens was passed down through generations. The precision of their alignments, solstices, equinoxes, lunar cycles, suggests a sophistication that rivals modern astronomy. But here's the real question: why did these ancient builders go to such lengths? What drove them to move mountains, literally, in the name of spirituality? That's the journey we're about to take. Together, we'll walk the same paths they walked, trace the shadows they measured, and decode the symbols they left behind. By the end, you won't just see these sites as relics of the past, you'll feel their pulse, their purpose, and maybe even catch a glimpse of the divine vision that inspired them. Ready to begin, let's step into the shadows of history and uncover the light they still cast today. Spiritual architecture isn't about walls and roofs, it's about intention. Unlike ordinary structures built for shelter or storage, these ancient sanctuaries were crafted to dissolve the boundary between the human and the holy. Imagine a place where every corner, every shadow, every echo was designed to pull you closer to something greater than yourself. That's the power of sacred geometry, where circles align with solstices, passageways frame the rising sun, and carvings seem to vibrate with hidden meaning. These weren't just buildings, they were instruments tuned to the frequencies of the cosmos. Take Newgrange in Ireland, a tomb older than the pyramids. Its narrow entrance perfectly captures the winter solstice sunrise, flooding the inner chamber with golden light for just 17 minutes a year. That's no accident, it's a celestial handshake, a moment when the living and the dead, the earth and the sky were meant to touch. Or consider the Hypogeum of Saflini, a labyrinthine underground temple where sound behaves strangely, certain chambers amplifying whispers into eerie, otherworldly echoes. Was this an ancient form of sonic ritual, a way to simulate the voices of spirits? What unites these sites is their deliberate interplay of space and symbolism. The zigzag patterns etched into the walls of Satal Heriuk might look like decoration, but to their creators, they likely represented water, serpents, or the flow of energy. The towering moai of Rapa Nui face inland, their backs to the sea, not for defense but to channel ancestral protection over the living. Even the choice of materials mattered. The blue stones of Stonehenge were hauled from mountains hundreds of miles away, not just for their durability, but perhaps for their perceived connection to the underworld. This wasn't architecture as we know it today. There were no blueprints, no contractors, just generations of storytellers, stargazers, and seekers who translated their awe into stone. They mapped the heavens onto the earth, turning landscapes into altars, and the most astonishing part, they did it without modern tools, without writing, relying instead on oral traditions and celestial observations passed down like sacred heirlooms. So when we walk these sites now, we're not just seeing ruins, we're stepping into a mindset where every shadow, every alignment, every carved animal was a prayer made tangible. These builders didn't just want to impress us, they wanted to awaken something in us, something primal and profound. And thousands of years later, their stones still hum with that same invitation, to look up, to listen, and to remember. Stonehenge stands as a silent sentinel on the Salisbury Plain, its towering stones arranged in a circle that has captivated humanity for millennia. But this isn't just a random arrangement of rocks, it's a meticulously designed cosmic clock, a bridge between earth and sky. During the summer solstice, the rising sun aligns perfectly with the heel stone, casting a beam of light that pierces the heart of the monument. In winter, the setting sun frames itself within the towering trilithons, as if the structure itself is cradling the dying light. These aren't coincidences, they're deliberate acts of celestial engineering, proof that the builders understood the rhythms of the cosmos with startling precision. Consider the sheer effort it took to create this marvel. The largest sarsen stones weigh up to 30 tons, hauled from quarries over 20 miles away. The smaller bluestones traveled even farther, some from the Preseli Hills in Wales, nearly 150 miles distant. Why go to such lengths? These weren't just building materials, they were sacred objects, chosen for their spiritual significance as much as their physical properties. Some researchers believe the bluestones were thought to have healing powers, their unique composition linking them to the underworld or the divine. Others suggest the journey itself was part of a ritual, a pilgrimage that transformed ordinary stone into something holy. Theories about Stonehenge's purpose are as varied as they are fascinating. For some, it was a grand cemetery, its circular ditches holding the remains of high-status individuals, their bones placed to commune with the ancestors. For others, it was a place of healing where the sick journeyed in hope of miracles, drawn by the whispers of curative energies. And then there's the idea of it as a communal gathering space, where tribes converge to mark the turning of the seasons, to feast, to trade, and to reaffirm their connection to the cosmos. What's undeniable is the sophistication behind its construction. The stones are shaped with mortise and tenon joints, a technique usually reserved for woodworking, showing an advanced understanding of engineering. The outer circle's lintels curve slightly to account for perspective, creating the illusion of a perfect ring when viewed from the center. Even the spacing of the stones reflects mathematical precision, with ratios that suggest an early grasp of geometry. This wasn't just stacking rocks, it was a form of sacred calculus where numbers and angles held spiritual weight. Yet for all we've uncovered, Stonehenge still guards its deepest secrets. Who were the people who built it? How did they transmit such complex knowledge without written language? And why did they invest generations of labor into a structure meant to outlast them? Perhaps the answer lies not in the stones themselves, but in the sky above them. In aligning their world with the heavens, they left us a message that humanity's greatest monuments aren't just made of earth and rock, but of wonder, of longing, of the unshakable belief that we are part of something far greater. Göbekli Tepe shatters everything we thought we knew about the dawn of civilization. This sprawling complex of carved pillars and circular enclosures, buried deliberately beneath the earth for millennia, wasn't built by farmers or city dwellers. It was crafted by hunter-gatherers, people who supposedly lacked the time or resources for monumental architecture. Yet here it stands, a staggering 11,000 years old, its T-shaped pillars looming like silent sentinels, each one adorned with intricate carvings of foxes, scorpions, and birds frozen in stone. What compelled these ancient people to carve such precise symbols, to haul and erect pillars weighing up to 20 tons, all before the invention of the wheel or even basic pottery? The answer might lie in the sheer power of belief. Unlike later temples built to serve settled communities, Göbekli Tepe seems to have been a magnet for nomadic groups, a sacred meeting point where scattered clans converged for rituals we can only guess at. The pillars themselves offer clues. Their humanoid shapes, with arms and hands subtly suggested, might represent ancestors or deities, their animal carvings acting as spirit guides or totems. The site's layout, with concentric rings of stones, echoes later sacred spaces, hinting at a symbolic cosmology where the circular enclosures mirrored the heavens or the cycles of life and death. But perhaps the most haunting mystery is why Göbekli Tepe was buried. Around 8000 BCE, someone carefully filled in the entire complex, layer by layer, preserving it like a time capsule. Was this an act of reverence, a way to retire a sacred space without desecration? Or was it a deliberate act of forgetting, a severing of ties to an old belief system? The sheer effort involved suggests this wasn't abandonment, it was ritual. What's revolutionary about Göbekli Tepe isn't just its age. It's the idea that spirituality, not survival, might have been the spark that ignited civilization. For centuries, we assumed humans settled down to farm, then built temples, but here, the temple came first. Could it be that the need to worship, to gather in shared awe, is what eventually rooted us to the land? The stones of Göbekli Tepe don't just challenge history, they whisper a radical truth, that humanity's first monuments weren't to kings or conquests, but to the unseen, the sacred, the mysteries that still call to us across the ages. Newgrange rises from the Irish landscape like a silent promise, an earthen mound older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, its white quartz facade gleaming like a beacon across 5,000 years of history. Step inside and you enter more than a tomb. You walk into a carefully engineered celestial event. Every year, as the winter solstice dawns, a slender beam of sunlight creeps through the roof box above the entrance, snaking down the narrow passageway until it spills golden light onto the chamber floor. For precisely 17 minutes, the darkest day of the year becomes a theater of illumination, as if the sun itself is breathing life into the realm of the dead. This wasn't just architectural brilliance, it was spiritual poetry in stone. The alignment is too precise to be accidental. The passage angles upward at just the right degree to catch the solstice sun, a feat requiring generations of sky watching and calculation. What does that tell us about the people who built it? To them, light wasn't just a physical phenomenon, it was a divine visitor, a bridge between worlds. The solstice event likely symbolized rebirth, a moment when the ancestors could briefly return, their spirits warmed by the sun's fleeting touch. Then there are the carvings, those enigmatic spirals, diamonds, and zigzags chiseled into the stones. Some scholars see them as maps of the cosmos, tracing the soul's journey through the afterlife. Others interpret them as representations of water, serpents, or even the life force pulsing through all things. One recurring motif, the triple spiral, might signify the eternal cycle of life, death, and renewal, a belief echoing across countless ancient cultures. The construction of Newgrange alone is a testament to communal devotion. Over 200,000 tons of earth and stone were moved, some materials transported from miles away. The mound's interior is a marvel of dry stone corbelling, the stones stacked without mortar yet still waterproof after millennia. Even the white quartz facade, sourced from the distant Wicklow Mountains, would have shimmered in sunlight, making the mound visible for miles, a literal shining monument to the sacred. But here's the haunting question: why go to such lengths for a tomb? Perhaps because Newgrange wasn't just about death, it was about continuity. The remains found inside weren't singular burials but collections of bones, suggesting repeated rituals over centuries. This was a place where the living returned generation after generation to commune with those who came before. In capturing the solstice light, they weren't just marking time, they were asserting that even in the depths of winter, light and life would always return. Standing in that inner chamber today, you can almost feel the weight of that belief pressing against the stones. Newgrange isn't merely a relic, it's a mirror held up to humanity's oldest hopes. In a world without writing, these builders carved their prayers into rock and aligned them with the heavens, leaving behind a message as clear now as it was then. That death is not an end but a turn in the great spiral, a journey toward the light. Megaliths stand as silent witnesses to a time when humanity's relationship with the sacred was etched in stone. From the eerie rows of Karnak in France, where nearly 3,000 weathered monoliths stretch across the landscape like a petrified army, to the solitary Moai of Easter Island, their faces turned inland as if guarding some forgotten pact, these colossal stones speak a language older than writing. But what binds them together isn't just their size, it's their purpose. These weren't random landmarks, they were portals, altars, and perhaps even amplifiers of something unseen. Take the alignments at Karnak. The stones don't just stand, they flow, row upon row, some towering over 20 feet high, others squat and moss-covered. Local legends whisper that they're Roman soldiers turned to stone by a sorcerer, but the truth might be even stranger. Archaeologists notice something peculiar. Many alignments point toward sunrise or sunset during solstices or equinoxes. Were they giant calendars tracking the seasons for agricultural rituals, or were they pathways for the dead, guiding spirits toward the horizon where earth meets sky? The stones themselves won't say, but their precision hints at a reverence for celestial cycles that span generations. Then there's the mystery of their distribution. How is it that cultures separated by oceans and millennia, from the menhirs of Europe to the dolmens of Korea, arrived at such similar designs? The answer might lie in something deeper than shared knowledge. Perhaps it was a shared instinct, the impulse to erect something massive, enduring, and imbued with meaning seems woven into our species. In Sardinia, the Nuragic people built conical stone towers that doubled as fortresses and temples. In Ethiopia, the stelae of Axar serve as grave markers, their intricate carvings echoing the same spiral motifs found in Ireland's Newgrange. Could these parallels suggest a universal human grammar of the sacred, one that transcended language and geography? Some researchers go further, proposing that megaliths were more than symbolic. They might have been functional tools for harnessing earth energies or channels for ancestral voices. The theory of ley lines, those hypothetical alignments of ancient sites, suggests that megaliths were placed at points where telluric energy, the natural currents of the earth, was strongest. Modern instruments sometimes detect faint electromagnetic anomalies at these sites, though whether our ancestors sensed these forces or merely intuited their power remains a mystery. Then there's acoustics. At certain megalithic sites, like the Ring of Brodgar in Scotland, the stones create eerie echoes, amplifying whispers or distorting sound in ways that might have been interpreted as spirit voices. Were these stones meant to be heard as much as seen? Yet the most haunting aspect of megaliths isn't their mystery, it's their intimacy. Many are engraved with cup marks, small depressions painstakingly pecked into the rock. Some theories suggest these held offerings blood, grain, or rainwater, while others see them as star maps or counting systems. But perhaps there's something simpler: fingerprints. A way for individuals long forgotten to say, "I was here, I touched this, I believed." That's the paradox of these monuments. Their scale dwarfs us, yet their details pull us close, reminding us that the sacred was never abstract to those who built it. It was as tangible as the stone beneath their hands, as immediate as the sunrise over a waiting altar. So when we look at a megalith, we're not just seeing a rock. We're seeing a conversation between earth and sky, living and dead, the finite and the eternal. These stones were never meant to be silent. They were meant to resonate, to hum with the weight of human longing. And in their shadow, we still feel it, that same urge to reach beyond ourselves, to carve our awe into something that outlasts us. The megaliths remind us that spirituality, in all its forms, begins with a simple act, standing stones upright, as if to say, "Here, this is holy." The moment you step into the echoing chambers of Saflini Hypogeum, something extraordinary happens. A whisper against one wall travels mysteriously, bouncing off the precisely carved limestone until it reaches another chamber, not as a faint murmur, but as a clear, resonant voice. This isn't just an accident of architecture. It's a deliberate design, one that transforms the entire underground sanctuary into a vast, ancient instrument. Across prehistoric sites worldwide, from the oracle rooms of Malta to the subterranean temples of Peru, sound behaves in ways that defy coincidence. Certain frequencies hum through these spaces with eerie intensity, vibrating through stone like a heartbeat. Were our ancestors not just builders but composers, crafting spaces where sound itself became sacred? Take the Hypogeum's so-called oracle chamber. When someone speaks or chants in its curved alcove, the sound amplifies, filling the room with a deep, otherworldly resonance. Researchers testing the space discovered something astonishing. The chamber's natural frequency hovers around 110 Hz, a tone that studies suggest can alter human brainwave patterns, shifting consciousness toward meditative or even trance-like states. That's no accident. The builders carved the walls at precise angles, the ceiling sloping to create a perfect sound chamber. They may not have understood acoustics as we do today, but they knew the effect. Imagine a ritual here, drums pulsing, voices chanting, the very walls humming back, blurring the line between the physical and the spiritual. This phenomenon isn't isolated. In the rolling hills of Scotland, the passage tomb of Micho funnels wind into a haunting drone, as if the earth itself is sighing. At Chavin de Huanta in Peru, labyrinthine tunnels channel water into roaring echoes, while narrow staircases act as natural amplifiers, turning footsteps into thunder. Even Stonehenge's bluestones, when struck, produce a metallic clang unlike local sarsens. Some theorize they were chosen not just for their color, but for their sonic properties. These sites weren't just seen or touched, they were heard, their vibrations felt in the bones. Why would sound be so central to sacred spaces? The answer might lie in the way it transcends the tangible. Light fades, carvings weather, but sound is immediate and immersive. In cultures without written language, rhythm and resonance could have been a way to encode knowledge, to unite communities in shared experience, or even to simulate the voices of ancestors or gods. The repetition of a drumbeat, the harmonic swell of chanting, these weren't just background noise. They were tools for transformation, oral gateways to altered states where the divine felt within reach. Modern experiments add weight to this idea. When archaeologists reconstructed the acoustics of Neolithic sites using 3D modeling, they found that certain chambers amplify low frequencies while dampening others, creating a disorienting, almost dreamlike effect. Participants reported feelings of timelessness, of being outside themselves, precisely the sensations sought in shamanic or mystical rituals. It's as if these spaces were tuned like instruments, their stones arranged not just for stability, but for symphony. The implications are profound. If sound was this intentional, then prehistoric spirituality wasn't just visual or symbolic, it was vibrational. The act of building these sanctuaries might have been as much about listening as it was about lifting stones. Every curve, every corridor, every carefully placed niche could have been a note in a grand, sacred composition. And when we stand in these spaces today, even in silence, we're standing inside an ancient song, one that still hums beneath the surface, waiting to be heard anew. Deep inside the caves of Lascaux, where torchlight flickers against walls untouched by time, a herd of horses seems to gallop across the stone, their outlines charged with movement and life. These aren't mere drawings, they're portals. For the artists who painted them 17,000 years ago, these images likely held power far beyond decoration. The same is true for the petroglyphs of Alta, Norway, where reindeer and whales are etched into rock faces alongside enigmatic spirals and humanoid figures with outstretched arms. What unites these creations, separated by millennia and continents, is their sacred context. They weren't made to be casually viewed. They were meant to be experienced in the hushed darkness of ritual spaces, where every stroke of pigment or chisel mark carried weight. Look closely and patterns emerge. The animals dominating these artworks aren't random choices. In Lascaux, aurochs and bison loom larger than life, their forms often overlapping or clustered in deliberate compositions. Some scholars believe these scenes depict shamanic journeys, where the artist or spiritual guide channeled the essence of these creatures to traverse realms beyond the physical. The famous Birdman figure falling beside a wounded bison might represent a trance state vision, a moment where human and animal spirits merged. Similarly, the petroglyphs of Alta frequently show reindeer in procession, their antlers branching like rivers across the rock. Were these migrations maps, prayers for successful hunts, or perhaps symbols of rebirth as antlers shed and regrow with the seasons? Then there are the abstract symbols, the spirals, concentric circles, and zigzag lines that recur across cultures. At Newgrange, spirals wind inward like celestial whirlpools, possibly tracing the path of souls or the cyclical nature of time. In the American Southwest, Puebloan petroglyphs feature the same motifs alongside star-like clusters, hinting at a shared vocabulary of sacred geometry. Could these shapes encode astronomical knowledge, a way to track solstices or eclipses without written language? Or were they meditative focal points meant to guide the viewer into altered states of consciousness? The repetition is too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. Human figures in these artworks add another layer of mystery. Some, like the sorcerer of Trois Freres cave, a horned being with the stance of a dancer, suggest ritual performers embodying deities or spirits. Others, like the ghostly handprints found in caves from Argentina to Indonesia, speak to something more intimate, a personal mark, a fleeting "I was here," left not in ink but in blown pigment, as if the artist's breath became part of the art. These handprints, often stenciled in red ochre, might represent initiation rites, healing ceremonies, or even attempts to commune with the walls themselves, as if the stone were a living membrane between worlds. What's striking is how these symbols transcend geography. The spiral appears in the megaliths of Ireland, the pottery of ancient China, and the body art of indigenous Australians. The serpent, coiled or undulating, slithers through creation myths from the Amazon to Mesopotamia. This isn't just parallel thought, it's evidence of a universal human impulse to distill the ineffable into form. Perhaps certain shapes and creatures resonated across cultures because they tapped into deep, shared archetypes: the life-giving sun as a circle, the regenerative power of the serpent, the axis of the world as a towering tree or mountain. But here's the most profound realization: these artworks weren't passive, they were interactive. In flickering firelight, the animals at Lascaux would have seemed to move, their shadows animating the cave walls. At altar, sunlight striking the grooves of petroglyphs at different angles might have made the carvings appear to shift or come alive at certain times of day. This dynamism suggests the art wasn't just observed, it was performed with a participatory element in ceremonies where the boundary between image and reality blurred. Decoding these symbols is like reassembling a shattered mirror. Each fragment reflects a piece of a world where art wasn't separate from spirituality, it was its language. When a hunter painted an aurochs on a cave wall, they weren't just depicting food, they might have been honoring a spirit, ensuring a successful hunt, or mapping the constellations that guided their journeys. The stones these artists marked weren't canvases, they were collaborators, partners in a dialogue with the unseen. And though we may never fully grasp their meanings, the very attempt to understand connects us to those ancient creators who, like us, sought to make sense of the mystery by leaving their mark upon the world. Imagine standing in the center of Micho on Orkney, Scotland, as the winter solstice sun sinks low on the horizon. For a brief, breathtaking moment, a beam of golden light slides perfectly down the tomb's long passageway, illuminating the back wall where ancient runes whisper of forgotten rituals. This isn't just a trick of the light, it's a meticulously engineered celestial handshake, a conversation between earth and sky encoded in stone, and Micho is far from alone. From the pyramids of Giza, where the Great Pyramid's sides align with near-perfect precision to the cardinal directions, to the Intihuatana stone of Machu Picchu, a granite sundial calibrated to the sun's zenith, these structures share a sacred secret. The heavens weren't just observed, they were woven into the very fabric of spiritual architecture. What's astonishing isn't just the accuracy of these alignments, but the universality of the impulse behind them. The pyramids of Egypt, though built millennia after Europe's megaliths, echo the same obsession with celestial precision. The Great Pyramid's air shafts align with stars like Sirius and Orion's belt, while its base perimeter divided by its height yields a ratio startlingly close to pi, a mathematical harmony that hints at deeper cosmic symbolism. Similarly, Micho's entrance doesn't just face the setting winter sun. Its entire layout mirrors the nearby stones of Stenness, creating a landscape-wide celestial map where tombs and standing stones form a unified observatory. These builders weren't marking time, they were mirroring the universe. Sacred geometry takes this further, turning numbers into theology. The Fibonacci sequence, found in the spiral of a nautilus shell, also appears in the proportions of Greece's Parthenon and the stepped pyramids of Mesopotamia. The golden ratio, approximately 1.618, shapes everything from the Great Pyramid's dimensions to the branching of trees, leading ancient architects to see it as a divine blueprint. When the builders of Newgrange designed its passage to be exactly 1/3 the length of its interior chamber, or when Stonehenge's sarcens were arranged in a circle with a diameter matching the moon's orbital cycles, they weren't just engineering, they were composing hymns in stone, aligning human spaces with the rhythms of the cosmos. But why? What drove cultures separated by oceans and centuries to invest such effort in celestial mimicry? The answer might lie in the primal human need to find order in chaos. For agrarian societies, tracking solstices meant predicting planting seasons, a matter of survival. But the spiritual dimension runs deeper. The sun's rebirth at winter solstice symbolized eternal return. The moon's phases mirrored life cycles, and the fixed North Star offered an axis of stability in an uncertain world. By embedding these patterns into architecture, our ancestors didn't just honor the gods, they anchored themselves to the universe's timeless order, transforming fear of the unknown into reverence for a knowable, patterned cosmos. The most tantalizing clue lies in the outliers, the alignments that defy practicality. Take the light boxes above Egypt's king's chamber, shafts too narrow for human passage but perfectly aligned with specific stars. Or the 1,000-year-old sun dagger petroglyph in Choco Canyon, where a sliver of sunlight pierces a spiral carving only during the summer solstice. These weren't tools for survival, they were acts of devotion, proof that the sacred wasn't just functional, it was beautiful. And perhaps that's the ultimate lesson of these alignments, that in a world without electric light, the heavens were humanity's first cathedral, and every stone laid in their image was a prayer. At Satal Heriuk, a 9,000-year-old city frozen in time beneath the Turkish soil, archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary, rooms filled with bull skulls mounted on walls, their hollow eyes staring from beneath coats of plaster. Beneath the floors, human bones lay curled in fetal positions, painted with red ochre as if ready for rebirth. This wasn't just a settlement, it was a stage for rituals so immersive, so visceral, that the line between home and temple simply didn't exist. Here, spirituality wasn't confined to special occasions, it pulsed through daily life, woven into the very walls where people slept, ate, and dreamed. The key to understanding this seamless blend of sacred and mundane might lie in shamanism. Picture a figure crouched in one of Satal Heriuk's windowless shrines, their face hidden behind a leopard skin mask, the flicker of torchlight transforming them into something otherworldly. Animal teeth clatter around their neck as they beat a drum fashioned from stretched hide, its rhythm syncing with the heartbeat of those gathered. With each strike, the air thickens, herbs smolder in clay pots, their smoke laced with psychoactive compounds pulling participants into shared visions. The shaman's voice rises, mimicking the growl of a bear or the cry of a bird, channeling spirits that blur the boundaries between human and beast. Artifacts scattered across the site tell this story in fragments. Clay figurines of voluptuous women, some seated on thrones flanked by leopards, suggest deities of fertility or protectors of the household. Wall paintings depict vultures swooping headless corpses, a possible reference to sky burials, where the dead were exposed to cleanse the soul before rebirth. Even the architecture speaks. Homes were entered through roofs, a literal descent into domestic spaces that mirrored the shaman's journey into the underworld. Every detail whispers that the supernatural wasn't out there, it was here, in the grain bin, the hearth, the bones beneath the floor. This intimacy between ritual and routine wasn't unique to Satal Heriuk. In the caves of Siberia, shamans' graves contain drums studded with iron rattles to mimic thunder, their bodies clad in costumes sewn with feathers and bells. At the Neolithic site of Lepensky Vrh in Serbia, fish-like stone idols with gaping mouths seem to sing or swallow, perhaps representing water spirits invoked for abundance. Even Stonehenge's blue stones, when struck, produce tones that resonate at frequencies known to alter brainwaves. Was their placement an attempt to tune the landscape for ceremony? What's striking is how these practices defy modern categories. Shamans weren't just priests, they were healers, storytellers, and intermediaries who navigated between worlds. A broken pot mended with gold in ancient Japan suggests repair was ritual. A child's grave in Germany filled with crane wings implies even play was sacred. This wasn't religion as we know it, a separate sphere of life, but a world-view where every action, from planting seeds to grinding pigment, carried spiritual weight. The legacy of these practices lingers. In the sweat lodges of North America, the drum circles of the Sami people, or the ayahuasca ceremonies of the Amazon, shamanic traditions persist, still bridging the visible and invisible. When we stand in Satal Heriuk's ruins or hold one of its figurines, we're not just studying the past, we're touching a thread that connects us to humanity's oldest quest, to find meaning not beyond this world, but within it, in the drumbeat, the harvest, the bones underfoot, and the smoke that carries prayers upward. Avebury's towering earthworks stretch across the English countryside like a giant's fingerprint pressed into the land, a vast, snaking ditch and bank enclosing nearly 30 acres, with standing stones so massive they seem to anchor the earth itself. Yet this isn't just a larger version of Stonehenge. It's part of an entire ceremonial complex connected to nearby Silbury Hill and the West Kennet Long Barrow, forming a ritual landscape where every mound, stone, and pathway was choreographed into a sacred dance. What's staggering isn't just the scale, but the intention behind it. These henges weren't solitary monuments. They were nodes in a spiritual network, each one a stage for ceremonies that wove communities together under the open sky. Consider Thornborough in Yorkshire, where 3 colossal henges form a near-perfect alignment mirroring Orion's belt. Their symmetry isn't accidental, it's celestial mimicry, a way to tether the earth to the heavens. But here's the twist. Unlike Stonehenge's towering trilithons, Thornborough's circles are defined by their earthworks, their banks sculpted from chalk that would have gleamed white under moonlight. This was architecture as ephemeral theater, where the very ground beneath participants' feet became part of the ritual. Processions winding between the henges might have reenacted cosmic journeys, their footsteps tracing paths between worlds. The circular form itself holds clues. A circle has no beginning or end. It's the ultimate symbol of unity and eternity. For agrarian societies tied to seasonal cycles, this shape might have represented the unbroken wheel of life, death, and rebirth. But there's another layer, acoustics. Experiments at sites like the Ring of Brodgar in Orkney reveal that sound behaves uniquely within these spaces. Voices carry farther, and certain tones resonate as if the stones themselves are listening. Imagine chanting or drumming here, the vibrations humming through the ground, amplifying the sense of collective connection. These weren't just places to watch rituals, they were instruments to feel them. Then there's the question of who built them. The labor required to dig ditches, haul stones, and align earthworks with celestial events points to societies far more organized than we often assume. At Avebury, estimates suggest over 1.5 million man-hours went into construction, equivalent to hundreds of people working for decades. This wasn't the work of scattered tribes. It was a communal project spanning generations, a shared investment in something beyond survival. The bones of cattle found near many henges, often slaughtered in their prime, hint at feasts where entire communities gathered, offering their best to the gods or ancestors. These sites weren't just spiritual centers, they were social glue, binding people through shared effort and celebration. Yet the most haunting evidence lies in what's missing. Unlike tombs or temples, henges rarely contain artifacts or burials. Their emptiness is deliberate. They were vessels waiting to be filled by ceremony. At Durrington Walls near Stonehenge, traces of temporary wooden structures suggest thousands once gathered here, their footprints wearing paths into the earth. They came not to live but to witness, to stand in the center of a circle as the sun rose over the heel stone, or to process along avenues lined with bones. This was theater in the round where every participant played a role. The true power of henges might lie in their duality. They were both boundary and bridge enclosures that separated sacred space from the everyday, yet connected communities across vast distances. Their stones and earthworks didn't just mark places, they marked moments, solstices, equinoxes, rites of passage when the veil between worlds grew thin. And though we may never know the exact chants or dances performed within them, their silence today isn't absence. It's an invitation to step inside the circle, to feel the echo of footsteps that walked here millennia ago, and to recognize that the need to gather, to worship, to marvel at the cosmos is written into the land itself. Descending into the Hypogeum of Saflini feels like stepping into the Earth's own cathedral, a labyrinth of chambers carved 3 stories deep, where every curve and corridor whispers of rituals lost to time. This isn't just an underground temple, it's a deliberate inversion of the world above, a sacred counterpoint to the open-air henges and sunlit megaliths. Here, in the damp silence, the boundaries between life and death, human and divine, seem to dissolve. The choice to build downward into the very bones of the earth wasn't practical, it was profoundly symbolic. For cultures that saw the ground as the realm of ancestors or deities, these subterranean spaces might have been thresholds to the underworld, or perhaps wombs of the goddess, where initiates underwent spiritual rebirth. The Hypogeum's design amplifies this otherworldliness. Its chambers mimic the architecture of above-ground temples, with false doorways and carved ceilings that echo the timber roofs of Neolithic homes, except here, there's no sky, no escape into daylight. The famous oracle chamber takes this further. When someone speaks into its curved niche, the sound reverberates at a frequency that vibrates through the body, a physical manifestation of the unseen. Modern experiments suggest this resonance could induce trance states, blurring the line between prayer and altered consciousness. What was it like to stand here millennia ago, surrounded by flickering oil lamps, the air thick with chanting that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves? But Malta's underground sanctuaries aren't alone in their embrace of darkness. Across Europe, Neolithic builders dug artificial caves like Spain's almenders, where spirals and concentric circles adorn hidden chambers. In Turkey's Derinkuyu, entire cities sprawl beneath the surface, their tunnels doubling as sacred passageways. Even natural caves were transformed. Lascaux's painted galleries, deep in the French Pyrenees, were never meant for casual viewing. To reach them, one had to crawl through narrow passages, a physical ordeal that mirrored the shaman's journey into the spirit world. The darkness wasn't an obstacle, it was the point. Deprived of sight, the mind becomes hyper-aware of sound, of touch, of the weight of the earth pressing in. In such spaces, every whisper feels like a voice from beyond. The symbolism of these sites is as layered as the strata they're carved from. The act of descending, whether down a ladder into Newgrange's tomb or through a narrow tunnel into the Hypogeum, mirrored the soul's journey after death. Water seeping from the walls might have represented the fluids of birth or the rivers of the underworld. Even the materials held meaning. The red ochre smeared on bones and stones echoed the color of blood and life, while the limestone itself, formed from ancient sea creatures, whispered of cycles older than humanity. Yet the most striking aspect of these underground sanctuaries is their intimacy. Unlike towering megaliths meant to awe from a distance, these chambers demanded closeness. To enter was to surrender, to let the earth swallow you, to trust that the darkness would yield revelation. That's why, even today, standing in these spaces feels oddly private, as if you've stumbled upon a secret the earth has kept for millennia. The builders didn't just want to impress, they wanted to transform, and in the stillness of these hidden rooms, surrounded by the echoes of ancient chants, you can almost hear the invitation to step beyond the world of light and into the sacred dark. The precision of Puma Punku stonework stops you in your tracks. Blocks of andesite carved with razor-sharp angles, interlocking like pieces of an impossible puzzle. Some slabs weigh over 100 tons, yet their surfaces are so smooth, so unnaturally precise, that they seem machined rather than chiseled. Then there are the Nazca lines, sprawling across Peru's desert like a giant sketchbook, their geometric shapes and animal figures so vast they're only recognizable from the air. How did cultures without aerial views or modern tools achieve such feats? This isn't just a question of craftsmanship, it's a riddle that has fueled theories of lost civilizations, advanced ancient knowledge, or even extraterrestrial influence. Mainstream archaeology offers grounded explanations. The builders of Puma Punku likely used stone tools, patience, and generations of trial and error. The Nazca lines could have been plotted with simple ropes and stakes, their creators walking the paths over years to scrape away the desert's dark surface. But even these rational theories can't fully dispel the awe these sites inspire. The T-shaped pillars of Göbekli Tepe, for instance, were erected before the wheel was invented. The Great Pyramid's alignment to true north is more precise than what many modern architects achieve. These aren't just monuments, they're anomalies that challenge our assumptions about the pace of human progress. The debate often centers on what advanced really means. Our ancestors may not have had steel or satellites, but they possessed something equally profound, an intimate understanding of their environment, honed over millennia. The Dogon people of Mali, for example, knew of Sirius B, a star invisible to the naked eye centuries before telescopes confirmed its existence. The Antikythera mechanism, a 2,000-year-old Greek device, tracked planetary movements with gears more complex than anything else for 1,000 years. These weren't flukes, they were proof that human ingenuity could flourish in ways modern science is still unraveling. Yet the allure of lost civilizations persists. Plato's Atlantis, the technologically advanced Hyperborea, or the submerged city of Dwarka, these myths tap into a deep-seated curiosity. Could there have been a golden age now buried beneath ocean or desert? The problem isn't the question itself, but the way it often dismisses the real achievements of known cultures. The Inca didn't need alien help to build Machu Picchu. Their mortarless masonry was a triumph of engineering and patience. The builders of Stonehenge didn't require forgotten technology, just keen observation of the stars and a society unified by shared purpose. What's fascinating is how these mysteries reflect our own worldview. In an age of quantum physics and AI, we project our technological biases onto the past, assuming that precision must equal modernity. But ancient spirituality wasn't separate from science, it was its driving force. The same hands that carved Puma Punku's flawless joints likely performed rituals to honor the stones as living entities. The Nazca artists might have walked their lines as acts of devotion, their paths a form of prayer etched into the earth. The truth may lie in the middle. There were no ancient astronauts, no single super civilization, but there were cultures with knowledge we've yet to fully appreciate. The real mystery isn't whether they had advanced tech, but how they achieved so much with so little, and why they chose to invest their greatest efforts in structures that spoke to the soul rather than the spreadsheet. These sites aren't just challenges to history, they're mirrors, asking us to reconsider what progress really means. The Venus of Willendorf cradles the weight of millennia in her palm-sized form, her full hips, rounded belly, and exaggerated breasts carved with a reverence that transcends mere artistry. Found in Austria and dating back nearly 25,000 years, she's far from alone. From the Venus of Lespug to the goddess of Satal Heriuk, similar figurines emerge across Europe and beyond. each one a silent testament to a spiritual worldview where fertility, abundance, and the feminine were not just celebrated but possibly sacred. These weren't toys or idol carvings. Their placement in graves, altars, and ritual spaces suggests they held power, perhaps as talismans, embodiments of deities, or conduits between worlds. The question isn't just what they represented, but what their prevalence reveals about the spiritual landscape of their creators. Take the Temple of Mnajdra on Malta, where stone altars and passageways align with the rising sun during equinoxes, but also with the moon's cyclical phases, a celestial dance long associated with feminine symbolism in later cultures. The soft glow of moonlight illuminating carved spirals might have evoked cycles of menstruation, birth, and regeneration, weaving the cosmic and the corporeal into a single narrative. At Satal Heriuk, murals depict women alongside leopards and bulls, their bodies merging with animal forms in ways that blur the line between human and divine. Even in caves like Lossel, France, the Venus with a horn holds a bison's crescent-shaped horn marked with 13 notches, possibly tracking lunar months or sacred cycles tied to female biology. But interpreting these clues is like assembling a puzzle with half the pieces missing. The term goddess worship can be seductive, conjuring images of matriarchal utopias where women ruled both spiritually and socially. Some scholars, like Marija Gimbutas, argued that Neolithic Europe was a peaceful, egalitarian society centered around a great goddess, a theory that sparked both fascination and fierce debate. Critics point out that assuming all curvaceous figurines represent deities risks projecting modern feminist ideals onto the past. Perhaps these objects served multiple roles, teaching aids about childbirth, symbols of clan identity, or even ritual tools used by shamans of any gender. The truth likely lies somewhere in the untold middle. What's undeniable is that women's roles in prehistoric spirituality were far more complex than old narratives of man the hunter, woman the gatherer suggest. At the Dolní Věstonice site in the Czech Republic, a burial known as the Shaman of Brno contained a woman adorned with red ochre and surrounded by ritual objects, a fox skull, stone tools, and a figurine similar to the Venus types. Her position hints at spiritual authority, challenging the assumption that ancient rituals were exclusively male domains. Similarly, in the Iberian Peninsula, rock art shows women participating in hunts, their silhouettes arcing bows alongside men. If spirituality mirrored daily life, then the sacred was likely as fluid and collaborative as the societies that practiced it. The danger lies in oversimplification. Labeling prehistoric religions as purely matriarchal or patriarchal risks flattening their richness into binary boxes they never knew. At Göbekli Tepe, T-shaped pillars bear carvings of both male and female animals, their interactions suggesting a balance rather than a hierarchy. In the Vinca culture of the Balkans, figurines depict androgynous figures with both phallic and vulvar symbolism, hinting at a spirituality that embraced duality. Perhaps these societies saw gender as a spectrum, or perhaps their sacred iconography transcended human categories entirely, focusing instead on forces, creation, destruction, renewal that defied gendered labels. What emerges is a tapestry of possibilities. The Venus figurines might represent ancestral mothers, earth deities, or even self-portraits made by women for women. The lunar alignments at Mnajdra could reflect a reverence for cyclical time, not necessarily tied to one gender. The real revelation isn't proving whether ancient religions were goddess-centered, but recognizing how much we've underestimated the spiritual agency of prehistoric women and how much their voices, though silent, still echo in the stones they touched. When we hold the Venus of Willendorf today, we're not just holding a relic, we're holding a question: how many other stories have been buried by time, waiting for us to dig deeper? The aurochs painted deep inside Lascaux's chambers aren't just static images, they pulse with movement. Their hooves forever mid-gallop, their massive shoulders tensed as if ready to burst through the stone. These creatures weren't merely hunted, they were revered, their essence captured in ochre and charcoal as something beyond prey. This duality, animal as both sustenance and sacred symbol, runs like a thread through prehistoric spirituality. At Satal Heriuk, bull skulls mounted on walls stare blankly from beneath layers of plaster, their horns jutting like crescent moons. Beneath the floors, burials reveal bodies curled like embryos, some cradling fox teeth or clutching vulture talons. These weren't random grave goods, they were passports to the afterlife, tokens of kinship with creatures believed to hold power over life and death. Consider the cave lions of Chauvet, their muscular forms rendered with such precision that you can almost hear their growls echoing through time. Unlike bison or deer, lions weren't typical prey, they were competitors, predators that shared the landscape. Yet here they are, immortalized alongside handprints and abstract symbols. Were they feared adversaries, honored for their strength, or guardians, their spirits invoked for protection? The answer might lie in the way they're depicted, not as threats, but as part of a larger tapestry where humans and beasts coexisted in a spiritual equilibrium. This connection takes physical form in the serpent mounds of North America, where Earth itself was sculpted into sinuous, undulating shapes stretching hundreds of feet. The Great Serpent Mound in Ohio coils like a sleeping giant, its head aligned with the summer solstice sunset. To the builders, serpents weren't just reptiles, they were symbols of transformation, their shedding skin mirroring cycles of renewal. Similar reverence appears in Australia, where the rainbow serpent weaves through creation myths as a bringer of water and life. Across continents, cultures that never met shared this impulse to elevate certain animals into bridges between worlds. The deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. These weren't random choices. The animals that dominate sacred art, bison, bears, birds of prey, share traits that resonated across cultures. Strength, stealth, the ability to fly or swim or vanish underground. They embodied what humans admired or aspired to, but also what they feared and depended upon. A falcon's keen vision might symbolize foresight. A bear's hibernation could represent resurrection. Even creatures like frogs or insects, often overlooked in modern symbolism, appear in Neolithic carvings as emblems of fertility or rebirth. Perhaps most telling are the hybrid figures that blur the line between human and animal. The sorcerer of Trois-Freres cave, part stag, part man, dances across the wall, his antlers merging with the rock. In Siberia, shamans wore reindeer antlers during rituals, embodying the spirit of the herd. These weren't costumes, they were transformations, a shedding of human limits to step into the skin of the sacred. The message is clear. To our ancestors, the boundary between species was porous, a membrane that could be crossed in ceremony or vision. What survives today is more than art. It's a map of a lost worldview where every creature had a role in the cosmic order. The bull at Satal Heriuk wasn't just a symbol of power, it was a living altar, its blood spilled in rituals that bound the community to the earth. The Serpent Mound wasn't just a sculpture, it was a prayer for rain, a channel for ancestral voices. These animals weren't decorations. They were teachers, guides, and kin reminders that humanity's first cathedrals weren't built of stone, but of stories whispered between species. Water has always been more than just a resource, it was alive, pulsing with meaning in the eyes of our ancestors. Step into the steaming embrace of England's hot springs of Bath, where the earth itself seems to weep warmth, or stand at the edge of Ireland's Tobernaut Holy Well, its surface shimmering with centuries of coins and ribbons left as silent prayers. These weren't just sources of hydration, they were thresholds to the divine, places where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds grew thin. The act of throwing offerings, a bronze dagger, a carved figurine, even a simple stone into these waters wasn't superstition. It was a conversation, an attempt to trade something tangible for the intangible, healing, protection, or perhaps a glimpse into the other side. The symbolism of water wove through every layer of prehistoric belief. In a world without microscopes, the way springs bubbled mysteriously from the ground, or rivers carved canyons over time, must have felt like magic. Water didn't just quench thirst, it purified. At the sacred spring of Clermont-Ferrand and in France, archaeologists found stacks of folded lead tablets, each one inscribed with curses or pleas to the gods, carefully weighted to sink into the depths. The water wasn't passive, it was a messenger carrying human words to the underworld. Even the act of drinking from certain springs, like Germany's Hypogeum, was likely part of initiation rites, the body absorbing not just liquid but the essence of the sacred. Then there's the sound. Descend into the Grotta dei Servi in Italy, where stalactites drip into underground pools, and the acoustics transform whispers into echoes that seem to come from everywhere and nowhere. In Malta's Hypogeum, the presence of water-worn stones suggests rituals where the sound of dripping or pouring water mingled with chanting, creating an auditory hallucination of voices rising from the earth. Water didn't just reflect light, it amplified sound, turning caves into natural resonance chambers where the line between human voice and spirit murmur blurred. The life cycle of water mirrored humanity's deepest metaphors. Rain fell from the sky like a blessing, rivers carved paths like time itself, and springs emerged from darkness as if reborn. At the source of the Seine in France, the Celts placed wooden effigies of deities along the banks, their faces turned toward the water's origin. In Anatolia, the ruins of Hierapolis overlook a travertine terrace where mineral-rich waters cascade like frozen waterfalls, each step an altar where pilgrims once bathed, believing the waters could cleanse not just the body but the soul. What's striking is the universality of these practices. From the hot springs of Japan, where Shinto shrines honor kami spirits believed to dwell in the steam, to the cenotes of the Maya, where sacrificial offerings were made to appease the rain god Chok, water was a global language of reverence. Even the placement of megaliths hints at this. Stonehenge's original bluestone circle may have been chosen not just for their geological uniqueness, but because they were quarried from a site crisscrossed by underground streams, as if the stones themselves carried the memory of water. Perhaps that's the most profound legacy of these sacred springs and ritual pools. They remind us that spirituality wasn't something our ancestors sought in the distant heavens, but in the very elements that sustained them. To bend and cup water in their hands was to hold life itself, a fleeting, shimmering thing that could heal, destroy, and return in an endless cycle. When we trace our fingers over the votive offerings left behind, a worn amulet, a child's tiny shoe, we're not just touching artifacts. We're touching hope preserved like a ripple frozen in time. The story of humanity's first sacred structures begins not with settled villages or plowed fields, but in the wandering lives of hunter-gatherers. For millennia, our ancestors moved with the seasons, following herds and foraging trails until something extraordinary happened. At sites like Göbekli Tepe, we find massive stone pillars carved with intricate animal reliefs, arranged in precise circles, all crafted by people who hadn't yet domesticated wheat or built permanent homes. This flips conventional history on its head. Here, the temple came before the farm, the sanctuary before the settlement. What compelled nomadic groups to invest such staggering effort into permanent ritual spaces? The answer may lie in the very nature of mobility. Hunter-gatherer societies thrived on flexibility. but they also faced constant uncertainty, unpredictable game migrations, shifting weather patterns, the ever-present threat of scarcity. In this precarious existence, sacred sites may have served as anchoring points, places where scattered clans could periodically reunite to reaffirm shared beliefs, exchange knowledge, and strengthen social bonds. The act of building something enduring in a transient world would have been revolutionary, a physical manifestation of collective identity that outlasted any single season or generation. Göbekli Tepe's architecture tells this story in stone. Its T-shaped pillars, some weighing over 20 tons, required coordinated labor on an unprecedented scale. Yet there's no evidence of permanent dwellings nearby, just the remains of temporary campsites. This suggests people traveled great distances to participate in construction, then dispersed again, returning season after season to expand the complex. The carvings hint at why. Elaborate scenes of dangerous animals, scorpions, lions, snakes may represent spiritual trials or creation myths that united diverse groups under a common cosmology. By investing in these shared symbols, nomadic bands were weaving themselves into something larger, a ritual network that eventually became the foundation for settled life. The transition wasn't instantaneous. At sites like Satal Heriuk, we see the blurring of sacred and domestic space, homes built around shrines decorated with bull horns, burials nestled beneath floors painted with ritual scenes. Here, the rhythms of daily life and spiritual practice intertwined, as if the community was learning to root itself both physically and metaphysically. The shift likely unfolded over centuries, with semi-permanent ritual sites gradually attracting longer stays between migrations, then evolving into year-round settlements as wild grains were domesticated nearby. This spiritual revolution may explain one of archaeology's great puzzles: why humans took up farming at all. Agriculture, with its back-breaking labor and vulnerability to famine, initially offered worse nutrition than foraging. But if the need to maintain sacred sites tied people to specific locations, they would have needed reliable food sources nearby. The first cultivated fields might have been ritual offerings, plots tended to supply feasts for the gods before becoming staples of survival. In this light, temples weren't just byproducts of civilization. They were its catalysts, transforming humanity from wanderers to builders, from individual bands to interconnected communities. The legacy of this transition echoes in later cultures. Stonehenge's alignment with solstices suggests it continued the tradition of cyclical gatherings, while Malta's megalithic temples show how sacred architecture grew more elaborate as societies became sedentary. But the core impulse remained, to create spaces where the human and divine could meet, where fleeting lives touched something eternal. When we stand before these ancient stones today, we're not just seeing the birth of architecture, we're witnessing the moment humanity chose to put down roots, not just in earth, but in the realm of meaning itself. Burial mounds rise from the landscape like silent sentinels, their grassy slopes hiding chambers where the living once laid their dead to rest, or so we assume. From the rolling hills of England's Silbury Hill, the largest prehistoric mound in Europe, to the serpent-shaped effigies winding across Ohio's river valleys, these earthen monuments speak a language of reverence that transcends continents. But here's the twist: not all mounds contain bones. Some, like Silbury, stand empty, their purpose shrouded in a mystery as deep as the layers of chalk and soil packed into their cores. Were they altars to forgotten gods, cosmic markers, or perhaps bridges between worlds, built not for the dead alone, but for the living who sought connection with what lies beyond? The tombs that do hold remains tell their own stories. At Sutton Hoo in England, a Saxon ship burial cradled a king's body surrounded by treasures, a lyre for the afterlife, a helmet to ward off spirits, gold coins placed over his eyes as payment for the ferryman of the underworld. Half a world away, in the mounds of Cahokia, near modern-day St. Louis, high-status burials reveal bodies adorned with shell beads and mica sheets, their graves aligned so the rising sun would strike them on the equinox. These weren't haphazard acts of disposal. They were rituals of transformation, sending the departed off with tools, talismans, and celestial guides to navigate the unseen. The architecture of these mounds betrays an obsession with alignment. Newgrange's Winter Solstice light show is the most famous, but lesser-known sites like Bryn Celli in Wales feature passageways that frame the summer solstice sunrise. Even the conical mounds of the Adena culture in North America often face east, as if the builders were charting a path for souls to follow the sun's rebirth. This celestial choreography hints at a shared belief that death wasn't an end but a journey, one tied to the cycles of the heavens. The mound itself might have been a symbolic womb, its rounded form mirroring the Earth's belly, ready to birth the deceased into whatever came next. Yet the absence of bodies in some mounds complicates the picture. Silbury Hill, towering 130 feet above the Wiltshire countryside, contains no burials, no grave goods, just layers of carefully stacked chalk and clay. Nearby, the West Kennet Long Barrow held bones, but they were rearranged over centuries, skulls grouped together, long bones stacked like firewood. This suggests these spaces were more than tombs. They were stages for ongoing rituals where the living returned to commune with ancestors, perhaps moving bones to maintain a tangible link between generations. The mound wasn't just a grave, it was a living archive, a place where memory was physically curated. The materials used in construction carry their own symbolism. Silbury's chalk core would have gleamed white under moonlight, a beacon visible for miles. The Hopewell Mounds of Ohio incorporated colorful imported soils, red ochre from the Great Lakes, sparkling mica from the Appalachians, as if painting a map of the cosmos in Earth. Even the act of building was likely sacred. At Michaud in Orkney, the stones were quarried from a site imbued with ancestral significance, their journey to the mound a procession of both labor and liturgy. To pile soil onto a grave wasn't just practical, it was participatory, a way for the community to literally shoulder the weight of loss together. What emerges is a paradox. These mounds were both intensely personal, holding the remains of loved ones, and expansively cosmic, their shapes and alignments tying individual lives to the movements of stars. They speak of a world where death wasn't feared as an annihilation, but honored as a transition as natural as the turning seasons. When we walk among these grassy hills today, we're not just stepping over graves. We're treading on a landscape of belief where every curve of earth was a prayer and every buried artifact a love letter to eternity. Fire crackled in the heart of prehistoric sanctuaries, its flickering glow painting shadows across stone walls where ancient hands left their mark. In the caves of Nerja, deep beneath the Spanish earth, archaeologists uncovered layers of soot and charred bones, not from accidental blazes, but deliberate rituals where flames licked the darkness like living tongues. This wasn't mere utility. Fire was a sacred actor in these spaces, a force that transformed the ordinary into the divine. Imagine standing in that cavern thousands of years ago, the heat pressing against your skin as smoke curled upward, carrying prayers to realms beyond sight. The dance of light and shadow would have turned stalactites into towering specters, the very air vibrating with the crackle of burning offerings. Torchlight did more than illuminate, it choreographed entire ceremonies. At sites like Chauvet Cave, blackened marks along the walls trace where handheld flames once brushed the stone, their bearers moving in procession through passages adorned with painted beasts. The effect would have been cinematic. As torches passed, animals seemed to surge from the walls, their forms flickering to life in the unstable light. This wasn't decoration, it was sacred theater, a way to dissolve the boundary between art and reality, between the living and the spirits they sought to summon. The strategic placement of hearths in sanctuaries like Satal Heriuk, often centered in ritual rooms, their ashes mixed with animal bones and ochre, suggests fire was both altar and medium, a tool for transmuting physical offerings into spiritual gifts. The symbolism ran deep. Fire consumed, but it also purified. In the Hypogeum of Saflini, scorch marks on certain niches hint at rituals where flames cleansed spaces between ceremonies, their heat scouring away residual energy. At Stonehenge, charred remains of bluestone chips suggest portable hearths may have been carried along the processional avenue, their embers symbolizing the sun's journey across the sky. Even the colors held meaning. The blue heart of a flame, rare in ordinary fires but achievable with certain minerals, might have been seen as a glimpse of celestial realms. Light itself was a sacred language. In Newgrange's Solstice phenomenon, sunlight was harnessed like a divine thread, but artificial firelight extended that magic year-round. At Malta's Tarxian temples, recessed alcoves could have held oil lamps, their steady glow creating pools of radiance in otherwise cavernous spaces. The contrast between light and dark wasn't just practical, it mirrored cosmological dualities, life and death, seen and unseen. In the depths of caves or the heart of stone circles where daylight never reached, fire became a miniature sun, a human-made star guiding rituals through the night. What's striking is the universality of this practice. From the sweat lodges of North America, where heated stones released steam as a form of spiritual rebirth, to the eternal flames guarded by Vestal virgins in Rome, fire's role as a mediator between worlds spanned cultures and epochs. The control of flame, so fragile yet so powerful, may have been humanity's first act of alchemy, a way to touch the intangible. When we stand before these ancient hearths today, their stones still stained with soot, we're not just seeing evidence of rituals. We're witnessing the moment our ancestors learned to hold the divine in their hands, to shape light itself into a bridge between earth and eternity. A flood rises, swallowing the world, not in one story, but in dozens. The Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, the biblical tale of Noah, the Aboriginal Dreamtime narratives, even the Maya's Popol Vuh, all share this cataclysmic thread. How is it possible that cultures separated by oceans and millennia spun such similar stories? The answer might lie in the very stones we've been exploring. These prehistoric sanctuaries weren't just places of worship. They could have been the original theaters where humanity's oldest myths were first performed, their echoes reverberating through time to become the world's sacred texts. Consider the underworld journey, another universal motif. In the Greek Orpheus myth, the hero descends to reclaim his love from Hades. The Sumerian goddess Inanna passes through 7 gates, stripped of her power at each. Even the Maori legend of Ingenuity Teep tells of the trickster Moi seeking immortality in the land of the dead. Now look at Newgrange's dark passage, where solstice light briefly illuminates the inner chamber, a literal descent into darkness followed by rebirth. Or Malta's Hypogeum, its labyrinthine corridors mirroring the twists of the afterlife. These architectural echoes suggest something profound, that the myths we know from tablets and scrolls might have first been lived experiences, rituals performed in sacred spaces to embody the journey of the soul. The sky gods tell a similar story. The Egyptian Ra sails his solar bark daily, battling chaos to bring dawn. The Norse Odin hangs from the world tree to gain wisdom. The Aztec Huitzilopochtli fights the moon and stars to ensure the sun's rise. At Göbekli Tepe, T-shaped pillars crane upward like figures gazing heavenward, their animal carvings possibly representing constellations. Stonehenge's alignment with solar and lunar events transforms it into a colossal calendar, tracking the celestial battles of light and dark. When myth speaks of gods in the sky, perhaps it's remembering the way ancient priests once stood in these circles, chanting as the first rays of dawn struck carefully placed stones, the original drama of creation reenacted for each generation. What's startling is how these motifs persist. The world tree Yggdrasil in Norse lore, the Bodhi tree in Buddhism, finds its echo in the carved wooden poles of Siberian shamans, or the axis mundi represented by megalithic pillars. The serpent, symbol of both danger and renewal, slithers through Mesopotamian seals, Mesoamerican temples, and the Dreamtime stories of Australia's rainbow serpent. These aren't just coincidences, they're fragments of a shared spiritual vocabulary, one that may have been born in the communal rituals of prehistoric sanctuaries. Theories abound. Some scholars point to the last ice age's cataclysms, real floods and volcanic winters that imprinted on humanity's collective memory. Others suggest these stories arose independently from shared human experiences, the terror of storms, the mystery of death, the awe of the night sky. But the architectural evidence offers a tantalizing middle ground. The recurring circular designs of henges, the serpentine mounds, the ascending passages toward light, these physical forms may have served as templates for the myths that followed. A ritual performed for generations becomes a legend retold for centuries becomes a sacred text. When we piece together these fragments, the myths, the carvings, the alignments, a pattern emerges. The sacred stories of humanity might not have begun as stories at all. They could have been embodied truths, performed in stone circles and painted caves long before they were ever written down. The flood myth may recall initiation rites where participants emerged reborn from ritual waters. The sky god's journey could mirror the path of the sun through a carefully constructed temple corridor. The underworld descent might be encoded in the very act of entering a burial mound's darkened passage. These sanctuaries were more than buildings. They were the first libraries, the first theaters, the first universities, places where knowledge wasn't written but enacted. And though the scripts have faded, the stones remain, waiting for us to listen to the myths they've been whispering all along. The night sky was never silent to our ancestors. Every star, every wandering planet, every eclipse told a story, one so vital they carved it into the very bones of their sacred sites. This is the heart of archaeoastronomy, the study of how ancient cultures mapped the heavens onto Earth. At Choco Canyon in New Mexico, the sliver of sunlight that pierces a spiral petroglyph during summer solstice isn't just a pretty effect. It's a sophisticated solar marker, a stone and shadow calendar tracking seasons with razor precision. But this celestial choreography wasn't unique to the ancestral Pueblones. From the stepped pyramids of Mesoamerica to the standing stones of Karnak, cultures worldwide wove astronomy into architecture with a consistency that defies coincidence. Take the 900-year-old sun dagger site high in Fajoda Butte. 3 slabs of rock lean against the cliff face, their edges positioned so that shafts of sunlight slice through like celestial needles. At noon during summer solstice, a dagger of light bisects the center of a carved spiral. During winter solstice, 2 daggers flank it, and at the equinoxes, a single beam strikes the spiral's core. This isn't just observation, it's poetry in stone, a 3-dimensional almanac that predicted planting seasons and ceremonial dates with uncanny accuracy. The builders didn't merely watch the sky, they conversed with it, using shadows and light as their vocabulary. The moon played an equally sacred role. While solar alignments mark the year's rhythm, lunar cycles required even more precise tracking. The moon's orbit wobbles, completing a full cycle every 18.6 years, a pattern the Chacones encoded into their architecture. At Cossa Rinconada, the Great Kiva's four cardinal direction niches align with lunar standstill points, those rare moments when the moon pauses at its northernmost or southernmost rise. Why such devotion to lunar motion? For agricultural societies, moon phases dictated planting and harvest, but the answer likely runs deeper. The moon's cyclical death and rebirth mirrored spiritual concepts of renewal, its silvery light illuminating nighttime rituals where priests, or perhaps astronomer shamans, interpreted its phases as divine messages. This fusion of roles, a priest and scientist, was likely seamless in prehistoric societies. At Scotland's Callanish Stones, the central monolith aligns with the southern moon's peak position every 18.6 years, while the surrounding stones form a cross-shaped observatory. Local legends speak of the Shining One walking the stone avenues at dawn, a possible memory of astronomer priests clad in reflective metals to mirror celestial movements. Similarly, Egypt's Temple of Karnak was oriented so that on the winter solstice, sunlight flooded the inner sanctum to illuminate the god Amun-Ra's statue, a moment when the pharaoh, as both ruler and high priest, mediated between heaven and earth. The stars themselves became characters in this cosmic drama. The Pawnee people of the Great Plains arranged their earth lodges to mirror the constellations, with the morning star, often Venus, guiding ceremonies. In Polynesia, navigators memorized star paths as spiritual roadmaps, their voyaging canoes following routes etched in the heavens. Even the seemingly abstract dots and lines on European megaliths, like those at Ireland's Loughcrew, may represent supernova events or comets, celestial omens recorded for future generations. What emerges is a radical rethinking of primitive astronomy. These builders didn't just stargaze, they calculated. Stonehenge's 56 Aubrey holes predict lunar eclipses through the Saros cycle. The Maya's Dresden Codex contains Venus tables accurate to 2 hours over 500 years. Such precision suggests these cultures possessed observational methods rivaling early modern science, not through telescopes, but through generations of naked eye study codified into architecture. The true brilliance of these sites lies in their duality. They were both compass and cathedral, merging empirical knowledge with transcendent experience. When a Chacon priest watched the solstice dagger strike its target, or when a Callanish elder traced the moon's path across the stones, they weren't just collecting data. They were bearing witness to a universe alive with meaning, where every alignment whispered of harmony between human and cosmic rhythms. In our age of light pollution and digital clocks, we've lost something profound, the visceral awe of seeing our place in the cosmos mirrored back to us through stone. These ancient astronomers remind us that the sky was never just a void. It was the first sacred text written in light, waiting to be read. The moment you mention Stonehenge or the pyramids, someone inevitably whispers the phrase, "ancient aliens." It's a tantalizing idea that advanced extraterrestrials guided human hands to create these marvels. Erich von Däniken's Chariots of the Gods popularized this theory in the 1960s, pointing to the precision of Puma Punku's stonework or the Nazca lines as evidence of otherworldly intervention. But here's the catch. While these theories spark imagination, they often overlook the ingenuity of the people who actually built these sites. Take the Great Pyramid's alignment to true north. It's astonishing, yes, but we also know the ancient Egyptians were meticulous astronomers who tracked stars like Thuban, the pole star of their time. The difference between "we don't know how they did this" and "they couldn't have done this" is vast, and it's where critical thinking becomes essential. Then there's the idea of earth energies, ley lines, telluric currents, or sacred geometry said to pulse beneath megalithic sites. Dowsers claim to feel vibrations at Stonehenge. Some visitors report strange sensations in the Hypogeum's oracle chamber. Even mainstream science acknowledges that certain rocks, like the bluestones of Wales, conduct electromagnetic energy unusually well. But does that mean ancient builders intentionally tapped into these forces? The jury's out. While it's true that many sacred sites sit atop geological fault lines or underground water sources, places where the Earth's activity is palpable, correlation isn't causation. Could our ancestors have sensed something we've lost the ability to perceive? Possibly. But attributing their achievements solely to invisible energies risks reducing their brilliance to mysticism. The most persistent myths often contain a kernel of truth. The ancient astronaut trope, for example, echoes real archaeological finds like the Antikythera mechanism, a 2,000-year-old Greek device so complex it was once deemed impossible for its time. Similarly, the lost civilization narrative resonates because we keep uncovering sites like Göbekli Tepe, which defy traditional timelines. These discoveries are revolutionary, but they don't require aliens or Atlanteans to explain them. Human creativity, fueled by generations of trial and error, is more than capable of producing wonders. When we assume otherwise, we inadvertently strip our ancestors of their agency, as if their hands were merely puppets for outside forces. The real value of these alternative theories isn't in their accuracy, but in the questions they provoke. Why do so many cultures share flood myths or serpent symbolism? How did nomadic groups coordinate to build Gerbeckly Teep? These puzzles push archaeologists to dig deeper, sometimes literally. When researchers tested the acoustics of Maltese temples, they weren't chasing ghosts, they were following a hunch that sound mattered ritually. The result, a groundbreaking study showing how certain frequencies alter brain activity. That's the sweet spot where speculation meets science, when wild ideas lead to testable hypotheses. At its core, the debate isn't just about stones and stars, it's about how we define advanced. A society that tracks lunar cycles with stone circles isn't primitive, it's specialized. A culture that prioritizes temple building over granaries isn't misguided, it's making a deliberate choice about what matters. The allure of alternative theories often stems from our own biases, equating technology with progress, or assuming that spiritual motives are less rational than practical ones. But prehistoric people didn't separate the two. To them, aligning a tomb with the solstice sunrise was science. Carrying bluestones 200 miles was engineering. And if their methods seem mysterious, perhaps it's because we're still learning to see the world through their eyes. In the end, these controversies enrich the conversation. They remind us that history isn't a locked door, but a labyrinth full of dead ends, hidden passages, and occasional flashes of insight. The next time you hear an outlandish theory about pyramids or portals, don't dismiss it outright. Ask instead, what mystery is this trying to solve? What does it reveal about our worldview? Because the greatest lesson of these ancient sites isn't just how they were built, but why they still captivate us. They're mirrors reflecting not only the minds of their creators, but our own endless hunger for wonder. Climate change creeps like an uninvited guest into these ancient sanctuaries, its fingerprints visible in the cracks spreading across Göbekli Tepe's limestone pillars and the rising groundwater threatening Newgrange's delicate carvings. Warmer temperatures accelerate erosion, while extreme weather hurricanes battering Mesoamerican pyramids, wildfires scorching petroglyph-lined cliffs rewrites landscapes in days that survived millennia. But the elements aren't the only threat. Tourism, while vital for funding preservation, carries its own paradox. the very footsteps that sustain these sites also wear them down. At Lascaux, the breath of visitors introduced mold so destructive that the caves were sealed, replaced by a facsimile. Choco Canyon's fragile desert ecology buckles under the weight of RVs, while Instagram-driven travelers chip off fragments of Stonehenge's sarcens as souvenirs. Looting strikes with even darker consequences. In Iraq, ISIS bulldozed Nimrod's ziggurats, but quieter thefts happen daily, tomb raiders tunneling into Peruvian huacas, black market dealers paying villagers to pillage Mali's Dogon cliffs. Each stolen artifact isn't just a lost object, it's a severed thread in humanity's collective memory. UNESCO World Heritage designation offers some shield, yet enforcement remains patchy. In Syria, Palmyra's guardians risked their lives to document damage during wartime, proving protection often falls to local heroes armed with little more than courage and cell phones. The balancing act between access and preservation demands innovation. Scotland's Skara Bree, a Neolithic village older than the pyramids, now shelters under a climate-controlled dome, allowing visitors to peer through glass rather than trample fragile walls. LiDAR technology maps Guatemalan jungles, revealing hidden Maya cities without disturbing a single vine. Meanwhile, virtual reality reconstructions let the public enter shuttered sites like Altamira's painted caves, their colors vibrant as the day they were made. What's at stake isn't just history, but humanity's soul. These sanctuaries are living libraries, not of books, but of gestures. The handprint in Pech Merle Cave, the Solstice alignment at Mnajdra, the acoustic secrets of Hal Saflini. They whisper how our ancestors turned wonder into worship, fear into art, stone into song. Losing them wouldn't just erase the past, it would impoverish our future. The real challenge isn't just conserving stones, but keeping alive the conversations they began 50,000 years ago. That's a sacred trust no single generation can afford to break. The stones of Göbekli Tepe and the solstice alignments of Newgrange may be ancient, but their spiritual legacy pulses through modern life in ways we rarely pause to recognize. Consider the enduring power of sacred geometry. Those same precise ratios governing Stonehenge's layout now appear in the stained glass windows of Gothic cathedrals. Their rose mirrors reflecting the cosmic order medieval masons inherited from much older traditions. The labyrinth etched into Chartres Cathedral's floor isn't so different from the spirals carved into Neolithic tombs. Both are paths for pilgrimage, tools to quiet the mind and awaken the soul. Even the Masonic compass and square, symbols of divine measurement, trace their lineage to the megalithic builders who first squared circles to harmonize earth and sky. Solstice celebrations offer another unbroken thread. When crowds gather at Stonehenge every June to greet the sunrise, they're participating in a ritual older than recorded history, one echoed in Christmas's borrowed date near the winter solstice, or Hindu Diwali's festival of lights chasing back the darkness. The Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca's Kaaba, with its circumambulation of a sacred stone, mirrors processions around Ireland's cairns or the sunwise circuits of Buddhist stupas. These aren't coincidences, they're evidence of a shared human grammar for approaching the divine, one that transcends doctrine to touch something primal. Modern philosophy, too, drinks from these deep wells. Carl Jung's theory of archetypes, those universal symbols like the wise elder or the trickster, finds vivid proof in the cave paintings of Lascaux and the shamanic figures of Satal Heriuk. The ecological spirituality now surging in movements like deep ecology or animist revivalism isn't new. It's a return to the worldview that saw rivers as living beings and mountains as ancestors, a perspective preserved in the petroglyphs of the American Southwest and the water cults of prehistoric Malta. Even quantum physics revelation that particles exist in relationship rather than isolation resonates with Neolithic beliefs where standing stones communicated across landscapes through alignments. What's most striking is how these ancient practices anticipated contemporary needs. The sound chambers of Hypogeum, designed to alter consciousness through vibration, foreshadow today's sonic therapy and binaural beats. The communal labor that built Avebury finds its echo in Burning Temple's collaborative art, where temporary temples rise and fall like ceremonial henge. In an age of climate crisis, the reverence for natural forces encoded in serpent mounds and sacred springs feels less like superstition than prophecy, a reminder that spirituality once meant stewardship. Perhaps that's the true gift of these prehistoric sanctuaries. They don't just belong to archaeologists or historians, they're birthrights. When a yoga student moves through sun salutations, they're unknowingly mirroring a priest at Mnajdra tracking solar arcs. When a poet writes of the moon as a mirror, they channel the same awe that guided lunar observatories at Kallanish. The stones still speak, not in words but in patterns. Patterns of connection, of cycles, of the unbroken human quest to find meaning in the dance of light and shadow. Their message is simple: the sacred isn't something we invent, it's something we remember. From the solstice alignments of Stonehenge to the subterranean chambers of Malta, prehistoric sanctuaries reveal a deep spiritual intelligence, one that didn't just build structures but encoded the cosmos into stone. These weren't merely places of worship, they were living encyclopedias of celestial knowledge, psychological insight, and communal identity. Picture a Neolithic priest tracing the path of the winter solstice sunrise along Newgrange's narrow passage, or a shaman in the Hypogeum's oracle chamber chanting at a frequency that made the very walls hum. These moments weren't isolated rituals, they were threads in a vast tapestry of belief woven across continents and millennia. What's astonishing isn't just the precision of these sites, but the universality of their themes. The same spiral carved into Malta's temples appears in the rock art of the American Southwest. The same reverence for water that shaped the sacred springs of Bath echoes in the cenotes of the Maya. This wasn't coincidence, it was a shared human language of the sacred, spoken in alignments, symbols, and shadows. These builders didn't have the internet or satellites, yet they created a networked spirituality, linking earth to sky, individual to community, and the living to the dead. The real magic lies in how these sanctuaries blur the line between the practical and the mystical. A stone circle might track the seasons for planting, but it also told stories about the afterlife. A burial mound stored bones, but its alignment to the stars suggested a roadmap for souls. This duality challenges our modern compartmentalization of science and spirit. For our ancestors, the movement of planets wasn't just astronomy, it was theology. The growth of crops wasn't just agriculture, it was communion. Yet these sites aren't relics of a lost golden age. They're mirrors. When we marvel at the acoustics of Saflini or the engineering of the Great Pyramid, we're not just admiring ancient skill, we're recognizing our own enduring hunger for meaning. The same awe that drove someone to paint a bison on a cave wall 17,000 years ago now fills us when we gaze at the Hubble Deep Field image. The rituals have changed, but the questions remain. Who are we? Why are we here? How do we touch something greater than ourselves? That's why these stones still speak. They remind us that spirituality isn't about having all the answers, it's about daring to ask the questions in the first place. The next time you stand beneath a starry sky or feel the hush of a forest, remember, you're part of an unbroken chain of wonder, stretching back to the first human who looked up and saw not just firelight, but a glimpse of the divine. If these mysteries resonate with you, join the conversation. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you visited any of these sacred sites, felt their presence? And don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into the past, where every stone has a story, and every story is a piece of the puzzle we're still solving together. The adventure is just beginning.